are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast, tracking the storm that is the Miami Hurricanes. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And joining me today, I've got Brandon Odoi, my guy from FootballHotbed.com, to talk a little Hurricanes football. So thanks for joining me today, Brandon. Brandon, can you hear me?
Yeah, anytime, Marcus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, man. Just kind of wanted to bring you in to talk a little Miami Hurricanes football, of course. We're coming up on the season. The new video game has come out. I don't know if you're into EA Sports video games, but I've been waiting for this video game for a while. And it is one of the many, I guess you could say, platforms that have the Hurricanes very high. The video game has them ranked as the 13th ranked team in the country, and there's 12 playoff spots. So interestingly enough, they are kind of on the cusp of making the playoffs or not. My question to you, Brandon, is this our boom or bust season for the Hurricanes? Mario Cristobal is going into his third year. Is it a playoff or bust season, in your opinion?
Well, I wouldn't kind of characterize it as a boom or bust type of season, but I would say it's an important season, and it's extremely important in the sense of the amount of resources that the Miami Hurricanes are putting toward this football program and making sure it returns to championship caliber. You don't want to continue to be just slightly above average or sort of average when the investment is at the rate that it is now, because it would suggest that there's really nothing that could save or get this team back to the championship ways of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So if you talk about a team that has only failed to win a national championship in the 2010s, and you're starting to just hope to make that a conversation again, and you do have to have a significant season this year, Mario Cristobal, University of Miami Hurricanes, because if you don't, the people who are offering the kind of capital that it's taking to turn this program around are going to have some thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot has been invested into this program from a facilities standpoint. I mean, the new dorms popping up on campus and new players coming onto the roster. Most importantly, you got Cam Ward, the quarterback from Washington State, probably one of the best quarterbacks to be the signal caller for the Miami Hurricanes in a while. He is going to be in the Heisman conversation, at least for the first couple of weeks. So just to have a quarterback like that at the helm, I think is a huge difference for this team and puts them in a position to possibly make the playoff. But he's not the only one. They got Damian Martinez and Tyler Barron and Simeon Barrow and CJ Clark and Marley Cook and Sam Brown. I mean, these are all high level transfers built to the acquiring of these players is basically making this team a college football playoff contender. But when you look at the schedule, it's also in favor of the Hurricanes as well. It's not a gauntlet of a schedule by any stretch.
I agree with everything.
But there are some concerns, because anything can happen during the season. But when you look at the schedule, what games kind of concern you from them actually meeting this goal of making the college football playoff?
Well, when I look at this schedule, there are three games that really stand out to me, Marcus. And the first one is the first game of the season. When you're on the road at the University of Florida, it's going to be important for this team to not only establish in-state stability and supremacy, but also to counteract the model see supremacy that we see all around college football. So you can accomplish and kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, when you go on the road to Florida and you win a football game. And this would be an impressive game to win to me. And the game has gotten a lot harder as when this game was first announced or first started to be talked about. Florida wasn't a team that was expected to be very good. Now there's talk about the quarterback coming back, and Graham Mertz, the young freshman way. There's some acquisitions that have been made out of the portal, most notably a wide receiver coming over from the West Coast. So there's always good talent on SEC teams. So this is not going to be a pushover by any stretch. Add to that, you're playing at 3:30. Add to that, you're playing at the Swamp, and add to that, you're playing with almost a brand new team. A lot of potential for lack of cohesiveness, and you've got to get it all together and put it all together in the very first game. So this will show a lot of maturity, even if they're in, but a much needed win to kind of get the expectations to where they need to be for this season. Because if you lose this game, now you really only can lose one more ball for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. That game against Florida, it's huge for a lot of different reasons. It's huge for recruiting, huge for momentum. It's huge for the optics as far as nationally is concerned. Definitely is an important game. It's the first game of the year, and it's against your bitter rival. But for me, I think one of the under the radar games that Miami should be concerned with is the first ACC game, because last year they started off on the wrong foot, losing to Georgia Tech in their first ACC challenge. So that first game against Virginia Tech, I think, is an important game. It's an under radar game. Of course, they don't have to get up for a Florida, and they should be able to take care of Ball State, FAMU, and USF. But once you get to the bulk of this schedule, you want to start this conference play on the right foot with a win at Virginia Tech. So that's kind of the second game that concerns me. And the one after that is Louisville, because it's coming off a bye, and we know the type of trouble that Miami has coming off a bye. It's been 7 years since they've actually won a game off of a bye. I believe it's 10 or 11 games in a row that they've lost off of a bye. And that is off of a road trip to Cal. So I am very concerned with that game against Louisville. And then, of course, Florida State, is Florida State. Not much needed to be said there. But those are the games to me that cause some concern for Miami really obtaining this college football playoff goal.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, you skipped past another game that I had kind of penciled in as under the Blake James administration, and I think that game presents a lot of issues because it's trappy in its nature, based on the fact that you could start looking ahead to, like you say, the remainder of the ACC season, this Virginia Tech opener. I just don't like that game, and if you need any evidence of that game being a potential issue, just look at Alabama and what happened to Saban. Found himself possibly staring down the barrel of the most embarrassing loss of his tenure. He was able to escape Tampa with a 17-3 lead, and he was playing against a redshirt freshman quarterback. That guy's a year older now,
Yeah.
and this is Coach Alex Golesh's second year, full year in his system, and that's a game that you don't really want to play. And if you play a game like that, you definitely don't want to play it on the road.
Yeah, I agree with you as well.
And
I
that's
think that's
exactly what the Hurricanes are going to do. So I think that challenges. I'm not so concerned about Ball State or FAMU, but that game, and I would add to that Manny Cristobal's, not Manny Cristobal, Manny Diaz's homecoming when Duke comes back to Coral Gables. That's another game that I have in the trappy nature for this Hurricanes 2024 team.
Yeah, that one is a good one too. The Fighting Diaz's are now in Durham, so that's definitely going to be a fun one as well. I'm sure Manny Diaz wants to get some payback to his former team. Um, let's also talk about the sleeper players to kind of look at this season. We all know who the big names are. We already kind of mentioned them. Cam Ward, obviously, is one of them. Kiko Mauanoa, Ruben Bain. But who are some of the under the radar type of players that you expect to kind of make some noise this season, not only just locally, but on a national stage?
I think I'd have to start with a young man on who came through the football hotbed programs, in Isaiah Horton, the wide receiver, who should be approaching his redshirt sophomore year. This is a young man who's about 6'3", has excellent speed, good ball skills and ability after the catch, and he's been putting in the work by all accounts to join Xavier Restrepo as a true threat in this offense, and he brings some things that Restrepo doesn't, which is the size that you need to make the play in order to be. He's having, if he's able to translate the offseason that he's had into the regular season, he can compete for national awards and possibly even, do some really special things. So he's one guy I have on offense. On defense, I would talk about a true freshman that I know very well named Armando Blunt. This is a young man that missed spring due to injury. By all accounts, he's doing very well. I mean, he played his whole high school senior career on a torn labrum, and he was still rated a 5-star after reclassifying up. And this is a guy that entered college at 16 years old, got a 3.9 GPA in the classroom. He's super. The talk's going to be about Ruben Bain, the return of Mesidor, and all of these other guys on the Simeon Barrow, all these other guys, allowing a guy like Blunt to sneak in for, maybe a special season with about 6 to 8 sacks.
Definitely some good choices there. Armando Blunt. I mean, what can you say about him and what he could do at a very young age is definitely something that we will be looking at this season. For me, I think AJ Allen is kind of a sleeper player that people are kind of forgetting about here. He dealt with an injury last season, but when he did get into the game, he was averaging 5 yards a carry. And he may be called upon maybe early in the season. The status of Mark Fletcher returning from game one is still kind of up in the air. It's not, fully guaranteed that he'll be a full go for game one or maybe for the first couple of weeks. So AJ Allen will be there to add some relief for Damien Martinez. And I think he is probably going to be playing with a big chip on his shoulder to really kind of show that he deserves to be on this team and he deserves his right amount of carries. So I think that's definitely a guy to kind of look for as far as on the offense. On defense, I think it's really time for Jaden Harris to really kind of show what he can do. He had the luxury of learning under a Cam Kinchins and a James Williams for the past season. So I think he has a real golden opportunity to really kind of show what he can do and that he can really kind of step into those big shoes that were left by those two guys who are now, preparing for the NFL next month. So I think Jaden Harris has a golden opportunity to really show what he can do on the national stage at that safety position. Plenty other sleepers that I named on CanesCounty.com. Be sure to go to the website to check that out. Once again, I've got Brandon Odoi here with me from footballhotbed.com, talking a little Miami Hurricanes football with the upcoming season coming up. Next week is already ACC Media Days, so things are happening rather fast, rather quickly. Before you know it, it will be the start of the season. Now, when the season starts, you obviously kind of know that Cam Ward is really kind of your most valuable player, right? Obviously, because he's the quarterback, and that's the most important position on the field. But when you look at the valuable players on this team, who do you think is the second most valuable player besides Cam Ward?
I think you have to go over to the defensive side and talk about Kiko Mainoa. He's a year last year. He was super effective. He brings back one more year of familiarity and Lance Guidry's defense. And I think he's the most important player on defense. He's going to back end, and the back end is supposed to be a little bit of the question mark for this Hurricanes team. And the front end is seemingly, kind of set the fire on all cylinders. Kiko, very closely matched by Wesley Biscaya, the second most important player, the quarterback of the defense, to Cam Ward on this football team.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you about Kiko Mainoa. I think another player that is going to be essentially really valuable for this defense is Daryl Porter Jr., because you need a guy like that to kind of lock down a side, to lock down whoever the number one receiver is on the other team. And you kind of have that with Daryl Porter Jr. So, knock on wood, but if he was ever to go down, then, this puts that back end of the defense in a precarious situation, I think. So I think to keep him for the majority of the season is really important for this football team going forward. So Daryl Porter Jr., definitely one of the more valuable players for me on the defense. On the offense, I think Jalen Rivers is actually very, very important. I mean, besides the quarterback, the other player that's getting the big bucks nowadays as far as the NFL is that left tackle, whoever is protecting the blind side of the quarterback. So I think Jalen Rivers is a very important piece to this offense, just with his veteran leadership. So I definitely feel like he could be one of the most valuable players. So hopefully for Hurricanes fans, he stays healthy all season. But with all that being said, Brandon, like there's high expectations, like I said. A lot of, pundits, I guess, are expecting the Hurricanes to maybe win double digits in games this season. When it's all said and done, when we're done with this regular season, do you think the Hurricanes get to that double-digit win mark?
Yeah, I think they can get to 10 wins. I think that's 9 wins is like the floor for this team. 10 wins is the expectation that I have, and I think it can potentially be a special season, even leading to a college football playoff. I expect this team to be in the ACC championship as the second team at the very least, and whether or not they win that championship, and depending on what else happens around college football, is like you can be a one-loss team, but in a bad conference or a conference where they underperform for the year and not make the playoffs. So I think Miami has the potential to be a 10-win team, make it to the ACC championship. I wish that meant more. Unfortunately, what happened to Florida State is a precursor for how this conference is perceived. That's why there are all these rumors of teams leaving to go to the Big 12 and try to create a bigger super conference and maybe sort of replace Texas and Oklahoma and what they've been to that conference for years as the ACC continues to kind of, lose its luster. But at the end of the day, I think 10 wins is the standard for this team. And I think it's fair because you got an All-American caliber quarterback. You got something similar at running back. At the tight end position, you finally have something that you can, kind of move and shake around with. You got capable receivers. They're talking about Mr. Brown from Houston as potentially a top first 3-round pick. And then you have Horton, as I mentioned, Restrepo, you know what you're getting, and George, who no one's talking about. But last I checked, he was still on this team as an 800-yard guy from just a year ago. So there's a lot to like offensively. There are weapons galore. I think if the O-line gels, and there's going to be a lot of focus on that. Rivers is proven. I think Inez Cooper is proven. You got some, situations. I even think Maigoa, the sophomore, is proven. I think you've got to try to figure out what's going on at center, and I think you've got to figure out that left guard, position or wherever they don't put Cooper, and then that's what this line will become and how well they gel. Replacing Matt Lee will not be easy. I think he made it look too simple last year, and we're going to see that early on, especially on the road at Florida. So what kind of center we have in this young man out of the portal from, I believe, Indiana, that's gonna show very early, how good the scouting was and how good the development has been in the offseason and the cohesiveness. But if I were going to leave something to bet on, it would be this offensive line with Mario Cristobal, Alex Maribel, and even Ed Pata and all the things that they do with this offensive line. Because these guys are really first class. And not only that, they've worked together for a long time. Pata being a graduate assistant at FIU when those guys were over across the street. So this is sort of how this thing shapes up. Marcus, I think the offense is expected to be good first. And usually they count on the defense, outpacing the offense. But I think in this case, defensively, there's a lot of new things going on because you've got new coaching in the secondary. Offensively, pretty much everything stayed the same. You have the same OC quarterback coach coming back, same receiver coach. You get a new running back coach, but I mean, how big of a difference is that? That's probably the best place to have someone new because pretty much the pass schemes, the blocking, everything else is pretty much the same. On the defensive side of the ball, that's where you see a little bit more fluidity, in my opinion, because you bring in someone that's going to be coaching two rooms essentially. Sure, there are analysts there. We got a really talented young analyst in from North Carolina Central. I think he's going to be valuable to this Hurricane defense. And then, of course, you've got Chevis Jackson from Marshall, who's worked with Guidry before. The talk about Jackson is that Jackson is a really big deal, in the coaching ability arena. So we're going to find out if that's actually true or not. And he's going to be tested right away on the road at Florida. So we're going to see just how good this team can be. But I'll tell you, the expectations, it's going to be hard not to keep them sky high for this team. And it's because of all the resources and the talent allocation of the offseason. It's great when that stuff's coming in, but now it's time to show and prove. And so these aren't predictions anymore. In a month, less than a month, you're going to have football just over a month. And, like we're under 50 days. So it's, when it's time for media days and these types of things, the guesswork is now, getting ready to be taken away. So, it's weird to say this, and this may sound strange, and you've never heard me say this, but I'm nervous about this season because, like I said, my biggest concern is all of the resources being submitted to this, and it's like, what if this doesn't work? Like, this may become something no one's ever willing to do ever again. and Miami will be known as a team that will be sort of a 6 to 8 win team moving forward. You know,
Yeah. It's hard for me to forget the past seasons, because that's kind of our basis of, what is to come in the future, is to kind of look at the previous seasons. But in this day and age, you basically have so much turnover that you can't really so much look at the past because it's a new quarterback. You've got a new couple of new receivers, of course, some in recruiting. You've got almost an entirely new defensive line as far as the many players that will be in the rotation. You got some guys that held over from last season. Yes, majority of those players really good players, but I think in this day and age, like a team can flip the switch from a 5-7 season to an 11-win season. We saw it with USC a couple years ago. We saw it with TCU a couple years ago. So based on, if you want to base it on the past, then you're probably thinking, okay, this may be an 8 to 9 win season. But if you're really assessing this team's roster, there's no reason why this team shouldn't win 10 wins, especially with the upgrade that you have at quarterback. Because let's be honest, I mean, TVD was responsible for, you could say, for a few of those losses. You could say he was responsible for maybe Georgia Tech loss. You could say he's responsible for maybe the North Carolina loss, the NC State loss. And, if those games turned into wins, I mean, and then you're already looking at a 10-win season because they went 7-6 last year. So just off of that alone, you would think, from TVD to Ward is +3 wins in itself. And then you want to add a revamped defensive line, a more experienced, wide receiving core, a very veteran group when it comes to tight ends. I guess you could say when you add McCormick, I mean, that's as many years. He's probably got as many years of experience of all the other guys combined. So yeah, I mean, the one place you kind of have a question on this team is the defensive backs, just because there's just not a ton of depth and experience. But everywhere else tells you that this is going to be a double-digit win season. And if they don't, man, it is truly going to be a disappointment for the staff, for the city, and for the university. So we'll see how it all plays out. This is why we play the games, obviously. But everything tells me that this team is on pace to be at least one of the top 12 teams in the country.
yeah, I think all of that's fair, and I think the biggest thing that you said is that from year to year, these are different teams, and that's where we are in college football right now. Occasionally you have people like Georgia, Alabama, who are so good at recruiting, Ohio State, that they can sustain, the turnover, either losing to the draft, the transfer portal, whatever the case may be. But you're going to see more elite level, high resource teams be able to sustain seasons and turnover because people aren't leaving to make more money because they're happy with the money they're making. People aren't leaving to win because I think it's the ability for teams to be stable and to grow and develop what they have that's going to make the difference moving forward. And lastly, I'll just say this on this subject. You're absolutely right. The fear of past years has been taken away because of the good nature of the talent that you brought in. You're majorly upgrading. I even think the backup quarterback is an upgrade to what you had even in the Tyler Van Dyke, because I went to University of Albany. I was there with people who were around that program. That program was an 11-win program in the FCS. And a lot of that, they said, was tied to the quarterback. They were not expected to be a good team. They were not expected to challenge in one of the tougher conferences. They ended up losing to South Dakota State. in the FCS, won the FCS national championship. So there's a lot to be said, not just for the first line of this University of Miami team, but the second line. And that secondary depth, I think, is the biggest difference maker. And it's the thing that has me confident in saying, yes, this is a 10-win floor season for the University of Miami, because you went out and you did the things you had to do to make it questionable. I think when you tried to get along and try to sell yourself into believing that Tyler Van Dyke was an elite quarterback, sell yourself into believing that you had a receiver core that could get, the job done, sell yourself into believing, that you had enough on the defensive line, because once Bain started getting double teamed later in the season, it just wasn't the same, because when Mesidor went down, other guys got hurt, you just couldn't sustain depth. And that's the difference to me. It's like you're not so concerned about a guy going down, because the second guy could have probably been the starter on most Hurricane teams.
Right. Absolutely. Brandon Odoi, once again, joining me here on the Storm Tracker podcast. That's going to wrap it up for this edition. Thanks again for joining me, Brandon. Hopefully we'll link up again soon. I'm excited for football. I hope you are as well.
Definitely, man. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Make sure you subscribe to CanesCounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30. You see it scrolling on the bottom of the ticker there. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all platforms. Lastly, subscribe to this YouTube channel as well, live from Canes County. Until the next episode.